when the bread box was a permanent fixture in every kitchen. Walk into a typical kitchen from the 1930s, 40s, or 50s, and one object almost always sat proudly on the counter: the bread box. It was as common as the toaster or the coffee pot. Families didn't think twice about it because it simply belonged there. Bread was a daily essential, and the bread box was where that essential lived. Morning routines often started with someone lifting the lid or sliding open the front panel to grab a loaf. Kids reaching for toast before school, parents making sandwiches for lunch, or someone cutting thick slices for dinner all relied on that small container sitting quietly in the corner of the counter. Bread boxes came in all sorts of styles, but they all served the same purpose. Some were made from metal with rounded corners and glossy paint. Others were wooden with simple roll-top lids. No matter the design, they became a familiar part of the kitchen landscape. In many homes, the bread box was placed in the same spot for years. It might sit beside the stove, near the cutting board, or tucked neatly beside the toaster. People opened it multiple times a day without even thinking about it. Part of what made bread boxes so common was how central bread itself was to everyday meals. Toast at breakfast, sandwiches at lunch, and bread on the dinner table were all routine. Because bread was used so often, storing it properly mattered. The bread box quietly handled that job, becoming one of those everyday kitchen tools that people relied on constantly but rarely talked about. The daily struggle of keeping bread fresh before modern packaging. Before plastic packaging became common, keeping bread fresh was surprisingly difficult. Bread dries out quickly, and once it loses moisture, it becomes hard and stale. At the same time, too much moisture can cause mold to appear much faster. Early bakers often wrapped bread in simple paper. While paper helped keep the loaf clean, it did very little to protect freshness. Within a day or two, bread could become dry enough that slicing it felt like cutting into a sponge that had been left out too long. Refrigeration didn't solve the problem either. In fact, cold temperatures can actually make bread go stale faster by changing the structure of the starch inside it. That meant storing bread in the fridge was often worse than leaving it out. Leaving bread completely uncovered on the counter wasn't ideal either. Air exposure dried it out quickly, and kitchens were full of dust, crumbs, and other things people didn't want settling onto their food. People tried different solutions. Some wrapped bread in cloth. Others kept it inside cabinets. But these methods were inconsistent and often inconvenient. Bakers and households needed a storage method that could protect bread without suffocating it or letting it dry out. The challenge was finding a balance between airflow and protection. That's where the bread box stepped in. It wasn't just a random container sitting on the counter. It was designed specifically to solve the daily problem of bread storage in a way that simple wrapping or cabinet space never could. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. We all thank you for your continued support, the clever design that made bread boxes the perfect storage solution. The genius of the bread box was its simplicity. It didn't rely on electricity or complicated mechanisms. Instead, its design quietly solved the exact problem that bread storage needed to address. Bread boxes created a small, controlled environment. Inside the box, bread was protected from direct air exposure, which slowed down the drying process. At the same time, tiny gaps around the lid or sides allowed just enough airflow to prevent moisture from building up. That balance was the key. Too much air and bread becomes stale quickly. Too little air and mold appears. Bread boxes sat right in the middle, offering just enough circulation to keep bread in good condition for longer. Materials also played an important role. Metal bread boxes were sturdy and easy to clean. Wooden ones offered a slightly more breathable environment because wood naturally absorbs small amounts of moisture. Many models included clever features. Roll-top doors allowed easy access without taking up extra counter space. Hinged lids opened smoothly and kept crumbs contained. Some designs even included ventilation holes placed in just the right spots. What made bread boxes especially practical was their size. They were large enough to hold a full loaf or two, but compact enough to sit neatly on a counter. Instead of constantly worrying about where to keep bread, households had one reliable place for it. The bread box quietly handled the job day after day, making it one of the most thoughtfully designed tools in the kitchen. How bread boxes became a style icon of the mid-century kitchen. By the middle of the 20th century, bread boxes had moved beyond being purely practical objects. They had also become part of the visual personality of the kitchen. During the 1940s and 1950s, kitchen design began to change dramatically. Appliances and accessories were no longer hidden away. Instead, they became part of the decor. Bright colors, smooth metal finishes, and matching countertop items started appearing in homes across the country. Bread boxes followed this trend. Manufacturers began producing them in cheerful colors like mint green, bright red, soft yellow, and creamy white. Many matched other kitchen items such as canisters, mixers, and toasters. Rounded edges and glossy enamel finishes gave bread boxes a clean, modern look. Some even featured decorative lettering across the front that proudly spelled out the word bread. These designs turned a simple storage container into something more personal. A bread box could reflect the style of the entire kitchen. In some homes, it became a centerpiece of the counter rather than something tucked away. Advertising during this era also helped cement the bread box as a household staple. Magazine ads and catalogs often showed perfectly organized kitchens with a bread box sitting neatly beside other coordinated items. Over time, the bread box became associated with a certain vision of home life. Tidy kitchens, fresh meals, and daily routines built around simple comforts. It wasn't just about storing bread anymore. The bread box had become part of the image of the modern home. The plastic bread bag that quietly replaced the bread box. For decades, bread boxes seemed like they would always have a place in the kitchen. But a quiet change in the way bread was packaged began to shift that reality. By the 1950s and 60s, bakeries started using plastic bags to wrap loaves. These new bags were cheap, lightweight, and easy to seal with a small twist tie. Suddenly, bread was leaving the store already protected. Plastic packaging did something paper never could. It trapped enough moisture to keep bread soft for longer periods of time. At the same time, the sealed bag protected the loaf from dust, insects, and kitchen air. For shoppers, this meant convenience. Bread could be tossed directly onto the counter or into a cabinet without needing another container. Supermarkets also began selling more factory-produced bread instead of bakery loaves wrapped in paper. These commercial loaves were designed specifically to stay soft inside plastic packaging. Because of this shift, the bread box slowly started to feel unnecessary. If the bread already came sealed in a bag, why move it into another container? Many households simply left the loaf in its original packaging. The plastic bag had taken over the job that the bread box once handled. The change didn't happen overnight, but as plastic-wrapped bread became the norm, the bread box quietly began losing its role in everyday kitchen life. How changing kitchens and new appliances pushed bread boxes off the counter. At the same time bread packaging was changing, kitchens themselves were evolving. The counters that once held only a few simple items started filling up with new appliances. Toasters had always been around, but now they were joined by coffee makers, blenders, microwaves, and food processors. Each new device claimed its own piece of counter space. Suddenly, the kitchen counter became valuable real estate. Homeowners began prioritizing appliances that performed tasks over containers that simply stored things. If space was limited, the bread box was often one of the first items to go. Kitchen design trends also shifted toward cleaner, more open surfaces. Designers promoted uncluttered counters where only essential appliances remained visible. Instead of storing bread in a dedicated box on the counter, people started placing it inside cabinets, drawers, or pantry shelves. The rise of built-in storage also played a role. Many newer kitchens included pantry spaces where packaged foods could be organized out of sight. With bread now arriving sealed in plastic and kitchens becoming more appliance-heavy, the bread box no longer felt necessary. Over time, it slowly disappeared from everyday use. Many were packed away, donated, or simply left behind when people moved into newer homes. The small but loyal group of people who never stopped using bread boxes. Even as bread boxes vanished from many kitchens, some people quietly continued using them. For these households, the bread box still offered advantages that plastic bags alone couldn't match. One reason was freshness. While plastic bags keep bread soft, they can also trap too much moisture, especially in warm kitchens. That extra moisture sometimes leads to mold forming faster. Bread boxes help regulate the environment more naturally. The slight airflow inside the box allows moisture to escape while still protecting the bread from drying out. People who bake their own bread often appreciate this balance even more. Homemade loaves usually don't contain the preservatives found in store-bought bread, which means proper storage matters even more. A bread box can extend the life of these loaves without needing refrigeration. Another benefit is organization. Instead of a loose plastic bag sitting on the counter, the bread box creates a designated space for bread and other baked goods like bagels, rolls, or tortillas. For some families, the bread box also carries a sense of tradition. It reminds them of kitchens from earlier decades when routines were slower and meals were prepared more deliberately. Because of these practical and emotional reasons, a small group of bread box users kept the tradition alive even as the rest of the world moved on. Why bread boxes are quietly making a comeback today. In recent years, bread boxes have started appearing in kitchens again, though not always for the same reasons they were originally used. One factor is the growing popularity of homemade bread. As more people bake at home, they face the same storage challenges that households dealt with decades ago. Without plastic preservatives, fresh bread needs a balanced environment to stay good for several days. Bread boxes offer a simple solution. Another reason is the return of vintage-inspired kitchen design. Many homeowners enjoy adding small touches that give their kitchens character. Retro-style appliances, enamel cookware, and classic containers have all become popular again. Bread boxes fit naturally into that aesthetic. Modern versions also come in a wide variety of materials and styles. Some are made from bamboo or stainless steel, while others feature minimalist designs that match contemporary kitchens. Beyond style, there is also a growing interest in reducing clutter and plastic waste. Keeping bread inside a reusable container instead of relying entirely on plastic bags appeals to people looking for simpler habits. For many households today, the bread box represents something practical but also nostalgic. After decades of fading away, this humble kitchen container is quietly finding its place on the counter once again. In the end, bread boxes didn't vanish because they stopped working. They simply got replaced by new packaging, changing kitchens, and different habits. But the simple idea behind them never really went away. And today, in many homes, that familiar box is slowly finding its way back onto the counter. If you enjoyed watching, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and drop us a note in the comments letting us know what you want to see us do next.